This is a story that dates to just after the Romans left Britain. And as the Roman Empire's power moved south out of Britain, all of this unified kingdom broke up into many different little petty kingdoms, each king ruled by a different petty king. But everybody remembered what it was like to be part of one great Britain. All were part of this unified Britain. Everyone wanted to be the new high king of all the Britons. But nobody was strong enough. So these petty kings fought. And one of these petty kings was a king called Herla. And Herla had an idea. He thought he wasn't strong enough. He didn't have the men, the horses, the armor to beat the other petty kings. But if he offered to marry the daughter of the King of France, the King of France could give him men, horses, and armor. And together they could defeat all the other petty kings. King Herla would be the high king of all the Britons, and the King of France would have the high king of all the Britons as his son-in-law, and together they could build such an empire. So King Herla sent off the messenger to the French king, and while he was waiting, he took court. And it was a time of this where the king's job was to be the legal system of the land. And if you had a dispute with your neighbours or someone, you would take it to the king. And the king would choose what to do. He would tell you what was happening. And so the king spent a lot of his time doing this. And this particular day, King Herla had been in his court giving out his justice, and he thought the room was empty. The courtroom was empty. And suddenly, at the back of the courtroom, he saw a figure. He saw a figure where there hadn't been one before. There'd been no flash, no bang, nothing. Just a figure where there hadn't been one before. And this figure was short. This figure had the legs of a goat, and upon his head was a golden crown, and King Herla realized he was in the presence of the Fae, and not just any Fae. He was in the presence of the king of the Fae, and the Fae are dangerous creatures. They have the power to give you everything that you want, but normally they only ever give you what you ask for. They make dangerous friends, but worse enemies. So suddenly King Herla stood up and he greeted the high king. "Welcome to my court. Why do I have the pleasure of your presence?" And the Fae king said, "The King of France is on his way. With his daughter, he's accepted your proposal. The messenger will be here soon. And I have a proposal for you. Invite me to your wedding, and a year and a day later I shall invite you to mine." And King Herla thought this was easy. Of all the things that happened with the Fae, going to a wedding, inviting the king of the Fae to his. So he instantly agreed that the king of the Fae would be welcome at his feast, and that he would be delighted, honoured to go to the wedding of the king of the Fae. And so, just like that, the Fae king was gone. There was no flash, no bang, no nothing. Just a space where there had been a figure. And coming through the doors was a messenger from the King of France saying that he had indeed accepted King Herla's proposal, and he was on his way with his own daughter. And King Herla needed to prepare for a fine wedding. And so King Herla did. He got all the finest foods he could get. He had tables laid, and the finest, whitest linen was put upon them. He sent for the best minstrels, the best entertainers. All the finest cutlery and crockery were set out before for this wedding feast. But he was very, very careful to leave a place of honour next to where his bride would sit. There would be King Herla, and King Herla ensured that he would be sitting next to the King of France. Because he wanted to impress the King of France. He wanted as many men, as much horses, as much armour was absolutely possible. And the day came. The King of France and his daughter came. And King Herla greeted her very quickly. He had the rest of his life to get to know her. Right now, he needed to negotiate with the King of France. He needed to negotiate to get every last man, every last horse, and all the armour he could get. And so The wedding happened and all came into the feast, all sat down and all were impressed by the food. The King of France looked impressed by the food that was there. And King Herla had wondered what had happened to the King of the Fae. But then suddenly, in the middle of the room where there'd been no people, there was a whole court of the Fae King. And King Herla was horrified. He hadn't prepared for a whole court. He'd left one place of the highest honour, and there were so many Fae. But the Fae King, do not worry, King Herla, look out into your courtyard, out into the outside. And King Herla looked out, and there were tents, and inside the tents there were tables with linen so white that it sparkled. Upon those tables were golden plates with golden knives and golden forks, and such food was upon that feast, and such food was now in King Herla's courtroom. And there was enough space for the Fae King's court and all of King Herla's court. And the Fae King took his place next to King Herla's new bride. And King Herla was pleased, because the Fae King spent the entire feast in conversation with his new bride. It meant that King Herla was able to spend the entire feast in conversation with the King of France, all about those men, horses and armour. And the King of France found that he was impressed by the fact that King Herla could command the Fae. At his command, there was gold and food, and the entire court of the Fae King were present. And he promised more men, more horses, more armour than he intended to. But the feast was soon over. The Fae King and his court went again, just gone where they'd been there before. And the King of France, leaving his daughter with her new husband, he agreed that he would go, but he would be sending, very shortly, a year and a week, he would be sending the men, the horses and the armour, and with King Herla's forces, they would conquer all the other petty kings, and King Herla would be the High King of all the Britons, and together the High King of all the Britons and the High King of France would conquer the world. They would make such an empire. So the King of France left, and he promised King Herla in a year and a week he would be sending his men, his horses and his armour. And with those men, horses and armour, King Herla combining with his own forces, and together they would be able to conquer all the other petty kings, and King Herla would be the High King of all the Britons, and then King Herla is the High King of all the Britons, and the King of France would be able to conquer the world and build such an empire. So the King of France left, and King Herla was left with his bride. But he had all these forces to build. He had to get his own men, his own horses, his own armour. He had to work out a battle strategy. He had to work out plans. He was married to the King of France's daughter forever. He would have the rest of his life to speak to her, to get to know her. Now he had to become the High King. He had much to do. And although he did have much to do, one thing he did not forget was that he was invited to the Fae King's wedding. And he made sure he had fine gifts. He made sure that when it came to the time and their year and a day was nearly there, he was waiting for the messenger from the King of the Fae to take them to the King of the Fae's wedding. And, as expected, the messenger turned up. And King Herla and those who were going with him were in their finest clothes, despite the fact they were travelling with their finest gifts. And they got on their horses and they followed the messenger out. They followed the messenger out of the land, into lands that were familiar, into lands that were unfamiliar. And in these unfamiliar lands, they saw a valley, and they went down this valley, and this valley was a cave. And the further they went into the cave, they could see there were dots of light, specks of light coming to the distance. And the further they moved in, they saw that every dot was a candle. And in there were all the Fae. And the Fae King himself came out to greet King Herla, got him down from his horse, introduced him to his bride-to-be, and King Herla was surprised that she was familiar. And he was thinking, how could I have met her? She must have come to my wedding. How else would I know the bride of the King of the Fae? And that was the first day of the Fae King's celebration. And there was such music and such dancing. And such food. King Herla thought the food that had been brought to his feast was amazing. This was nothing to what was at the Fey King's feast. And he watched the beauty of the Fey dancing backwards and forwards. And that was just the first day. And on the second day of the celebrations, if he had enjoyed the music before, it was even more so now. And such food and celebration, and it was more marvellous than King Herla could even have imagined on the first day. And that day passed, and the second day came, and everything on the third day made the first 2 days feel like they were nothing. Such music, such dancing, such beauty, such celebration, such food. It was a marvel. But King Herla knew that the French king would be coming with men, horses, and army. He couldn't stay any longer. He had to get back up. He had to go back. He needed to become the high king of all the Britons. But the celebrations were showing no time of ceasing. And King Herla was frightened of giving offence to the Fey king because they are dangerous creatures. So he very trepidatiously went up to the Fey king, and he told the Fey king that he had experienced such marvels, such music, such celebration, such dancing, that he would be able to tell people forever of the marvels of the Fey king. Be able to tell people all these stories of the Fey were poor friends, worse enemies, that he had never received such hospitality, such joy, such pleasure. But he had to go. The King of France would be sending men, horses, and armour. He needed to become the high king of all the Britons. And he asked the Fey king to please let him go. And they would be friends forever. But he had to get back to his own lands now. And the Fey king seemed sorry to let him go. But he understood, after he'd known about the deal to begin with, and said yes, and escorted King Herla himself to his horse, and all the men got on their horses, and all were laden with gifts. And just as King Herla was about to leave, thinking he had been to the land of the Fey and he had got away with nothing but this marvellous story to tell, the Fey king handed up a small dog into King Herla's arms, and it rested in King Herla's arms, and he told King Herla, wherever you go, whatever you do, you must not get down from your horses till this dog jumps from your arms. And King Herla thought that was nothing to have to wait for. He would tell such stories of these 3 days, and all he had to do was wait for a dog to jump from his arms. And so King Herla and his men followed out the messenger, and they went out. They went away from the cave, leaving the dancing and the lights behind them. Came out through the valley into lands that were unfamiliar, slowly into lands that were familiar but not right. There was a farm where King Herla had sworn there was no farm before. And King Herla and his men went into the farmyard, and there was the farmer, and no farmer is ever happy to have armed rich men in horses coming into his farmyard. He was afraid, and King Herla's men said, "Do not be afraid, this is your king, this is King Herla." And the farmer said, "Who? My king? King Herla? It's not my king. I know King Herla. King Herla. Oh, there's stories about King Herla. He wait, let me. He was the king that was tricked by the Fey into attending the wedding of his own wife to the Fey king. Oh yes, that's a great, I love that story. It's a great story, but that's hundreds of years old, that story. And the men around King Herla were so angry that this farmer should be so rude to their own king. One of the men drew his sword, got off his horse, but the moment his foot touched the ground, he vanished into a cloud of dust. And suddenly King Herla realised what had happened. Hadn't been 3 marvellous days in the Fey kingdom. It had been 300 years. There was no men, there was no horses, there was no armour on their way. He would never be the high king of all the Britons. And because the dog had not jumped from his arm, if anyone got down from their horses, those 300 years would catch up with them in a second. King Herla, knowing he was now never going to be the high king of all the Britons, turned his horse around, and his men followed him out of the farmyard. They say King Herla rides still. When you look on a hillside and you see a line of horses, it's King Herla and his men. But others say that after the hundreds and hundreds of years passed, one by one the men couldn't take it anymore, and as the dog had not jumped from King Herla's arms, one by one of them got down from their horses, and every time they touched the ground, they vanished in a cloud of dust as the 100 years caught up with them in a second. So beware. The Fae are powerful creatures, and even their friendship is deadly, their enmity is worse. They can give you everything you want, but they only ever give you what you ask for. And that is my story of King Herla.